I'm worth $25 million and I drive a 2018 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a coffee stain on the center console that I've never bothered to clean. The car has 127,000 miles on it, needs new brake pads, and the air conditioning makes it sound like a dying cat when I turn it on. Most people who know my net worth think I'm insane. They expect me to roll up in a Lamborghini or at least a Tesla, something that screams success, something that matches the numbers in my bank account. But they don't understand. They can't understand because they never knew Marcus. My name is David Chen, and this is the story of how I learned that everything I thought I knew about wealth, success, and what really matters in life was completely wrong. It's the story of a friendship that changed everything, a promise I made to a dying man, and why I choose to drive a Honda Civic instead of the Ferrari that sits gathering dust in my garage. It started 12 years ago, back when I thought I had life figured out. I was 28, fresh off my second startup exit and absolutely insufferable. I just sold my social media analytics company for $47 million, and I was riding high on the kind of arrogance that only comes with sudden, overwhelming success. I had the penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, the Porsche 911 Turbo S, the Rolex Submariner, and a bank account that made my parents' immigrant dreams seem quaint and small. I remember the exact moment I first saw Marcus Williams. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and I was running late for a meeting with potential investors for my third startup idea. I decided to grab coffee from this little hole in the wall place called Manny's that served the strongest espresso in the city, even though it was completely out of my way. I was standing in line, checking my phone, probably looking every bit the tech bro stereotype in my expensive jeans and designer hoodie, when I heard someone behind me say, "Excuse me, is that the new iPhone?" I turned around and saw a man about my age, maybe a year or two older, wearing faded jeans and a worn Seattle Mariners t-shirt. His hair was a mess, like he just rolled out of bed, and he had this, curious, almost childlike expression as he stared at my phone. Most people in my circle would have dismissed him immediately, but something about his smile made me pause. "Yeah, it just came out last week," I said, holding it up so he could see. His eyes lit up. Man, the camera on that thing must be incredible. I've been reading about the new sensor technology they're using. Are you finding the low light performance is really that much better than the previous generation? Was struck by how genuine his interest seemed. Most people who asked about my phone were either trying to impress me or make some kind of social connection. This guy seemed genuinely fascinated by the technology itself. And we ended up talking for 20 minutes. His name was Marcus Williams, and he worked as a mechanic at a Honda dealership across town. He lived in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill, rode the bus to work every day, and had never owned a car newer than 10 years old. But when he talked about technology, about how things worked, about the intricate beauty of a well-designed engine or the elegance of a perfectly coded algorithm, his whole face would light up with this infectious enthusiasm. I was fascinated. Here was this guy who probably made $30,000 a year talking about quantum computing and machine learning algorithms with the same passion and depth of knowledge as the Stanford PhDs I worked with. He hadn't gone to college, couldn't afford the latest gadgets, but he understood technology at a level that most of my highly educated colleagues never would. I found myself saying, if you're ever interested in the tech world, I might know some people. Marcus laughed, not unkindly. Thanks, but I'm happy where I am. There's something beautiful about working with your hands, you know? Taking something broken and making it work again. Plus, I get to drive a different car every day. Yesterday, I worked on this 1995 Civic with 300,000 miles that still ran like a dream. The owner was this elderly woman, who'd had it since new, and she took such good care of it. There's something to be said for that kind of relationship with things, don't you think? I didn't think that actually at the time. I thought it sounded like a waste of potential. Here was this brilliant guy content to fix other people's cars when he could be building the next unicorn startup. But I was intrigued enough to give him my number and suggest we grab coffee again sometime. That coffee turned into a weekly tradition. Every Tuesday morning, we'd meet at Manny's, and Marcus would ask me about my work while I peppered him with questions about his philosophy on life, because that's what it was, really, a philosophy. Marcus had this way of looking at the world that was completely foreign to everything I'd been taught about success and ambition. You know what I love about Hondas? He said one morning, about a month into our friendship. They're honest cars. They don't pretend to be something they're not. A Civic isn't trying to be a Ferrari. It's not trying to impress anyone. It just does its job day after day, year after year without complaint. There's integrity in that. I was driving the Porsche at the time, and I remember feeling oddly defensive. But doesn't part of you want more? Don't you want to push yourself to see what you're capable of achieving? Marcus smiled, that gentle smile of his. I am seeing what I'm capable of achieving. Yesterday, I helped Mrs. Patterson get her Accord running again. She's 82, lives on Social Security, and that car is her lifeline to the grocery store, the doctor, her daughter across town. When I handed her back those keys and saw the relief on her face, that felt like achievement to me. But you could be doing so much more, I insisted. You have this incredible mind, this understanding of how things work. You could be building companies, changing the world on a massive scale. Maybe, Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee, but changing Mrs. Patterson's world felt pretty massive to her. These conversations started to get under my skin, not in a bad way, but in the way that a really good book or movie stays with you long after you finished it. I'd find myself thinking about Marcus's perspective while I was in board meetings, while I was networking at industry events, while I was lying awake in my king-size bed in my 1,500 square foot bedroom, staring at the ceiling, and wondering why I felt so empty despite having everything I thought I wanted. And the thing about Marcus was that he was genuinely happy, not just content, not just making the best of things, but actually radiantly happy. He talked about his work with passion, about his neighbors with affection, about his simple life with a kind of joy that I'd never experienced despite all my success. It was unsettling. One Tuesday, about 6 months into our friendship, Marcus didn't show up. I waited for an hour, figured he'd overslept or had car trouble, and when I went about my day, but the next week he wasn't there either. I tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I started to worry. I realized, like, I didn't even know his address. We'd always met at the coffee shop, and somehow in all our conversations, I'd never thought to ask where he lived. I knew he worked at Hanson Honda, so I drove over there one afternoon feeling slightly ridiculous in my Porsche surrounded by practical family cars. The service manager, gruff man named Pete, looked at me suspiciously when I asked about Marcus. You a friend of his? Yeah, we meet for coffee every week. He hasn't shown up in a while, and I'm worried. Pete's expression softened. Marcus is in the hospital, been there about 2 weeks now. Cancer. The word hit me like a physical blow. Cancer. Marcus was 30 years old, ate organic vegetables, rode his bike everywhere he could. How could he have cancer? What kind? I managed to ask. Pancreatic, caught it late. Pete shook his head. Kid's got more fight in him than anyone I've ever met, but the doctors, well, they're not optimistic. I drove straight to the hospital, my hand shaking on the steering wheel. I found Marcus in room 412, looking impossibly small in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed around him. But when he saw me, his face lit up with that same genuine smile. David, man, I'm sorry about missing coffee. Things got a little complicated. A little complicated. The guy was dying and he was apologizing for missing coffee. Marcus, why didn't you call me? I could have, I don't know. I could have done something. He laughed, though it turned into a cough that made my chest ache. Like what? You're not a doctor, and even if you were, some things can't be fixed, you know. Sometimes things just wear out. Over the next 3 months, I spent more time in that hospital room than I did in my office. Marcus was fascinated by the machines keeping him alive, asking the nurses detailed questions about how the IV pumps worked, what the monitors were measuring, how the bed's adjustable mechanisms functioned. Even dying, he approached the world with curiosity and wonder. You know what I've been thinking about? He said one afternoon. We'd been sitting in comfortable silence for a while, watching the rain streak down the window. Mrs. Patterson's Accord, it's probably going to outlast me. Don't talk like that, I said automatically. Why not? It's true. That car has good bones, good engineering. It was built to last, and it will. There's comfort in that, don't you think? And the idea that, yeah, something you cared for will keep going, keep serving, keep being useful long after you're gone. And he turned to look at me, his eyes serious. That's what I want to talk to you about, actually. I've been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind. Marcus, no, listen, I know you think I wasted my potential, that I should have done more with my life. And maybe you're right. Maybe I could have built something bigger, made more money, had more impact in the traditional sense, but I need you to understand something. He shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. Every car I fixed, every person I helped, that mattered. Mrs. Patterson getting to see her daughter, the college kid whose Honda got him to his job interview, the young mother whose pilot kept her family safe. I touched all those lives, made them a little bit better, a little bit easier. That's not nothing, David. That's everything. I felt tears in my eyes, though I tried to hide them. I know, I'm starting to understand. Are you? Because I have a favor to ask you, and it's going to sound crazy. Anything. Marcus smiled. I want you to buy a Honda. I laughed despite myself. Well, what? I'm serious. I want you to buy a Honda Civic, a basic one, nothing fancy. And I want you to drive it. Not as a joke, not as some kind of social experiment, but really drive it for a year minimum. Marcus, that's ridiculous. I know what you can afford. That's not the point. He reached over and grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. The point is perspective. The point is understanding that worth isn't measured in dollars, that success isn't always about reaching higher, climbing faster, accumulating more. I don't understand. You will. Promise me, David. Promise me you'll buy a Honda and drive it for a year. Promise me you'll try to see the world the way I see it just for a while. I wanted to argue to tell him it was the pain medication talking that he wasn't thinking clearly, but something in his eyes, the same intensity he'd brought to every conversation we'd ever had, stopped me. I promise. Marcus died 3 weeks later. I was holding his hand when it happened. And his last words were, "Remember the Honda," as if I could forget. The funeral was small but packed. I was amazed at how many lives Marcus had touched. Mrs. Patterson was there, along with dozens of other customers whose cars he'd repaired over the years, his co-workers from the dealership, neighbors from his apartment building, the barista from Manny's, who'd always saved him the last blueberry muffin. Person after person came up to me, somehow knowing I was Marcus's friend, to tell me stories about his kindness, his generosity, his genuine care for others. He once worked on my car for free, a young woman told me. I was a single mom, barely making ends meet, and my Civic needed a major repair. I thought I'd have to choose between fixing my car and feeding my daughter that month. Marcus told me he'd found a used part that would work just as well, and somehow the labor Goiger got donated too. I knew he paid for it himself, and the stories kept coming. A Marcus lending tools to neighbors, tutoring kids in the apartment building with their math homework, volunteering at the food bank on weekends. This man who I'd thought was wasting his potential had been quietly, consistently making the world better in ways that no IPO or acquisition ever could. 3 days after the funeral, I walked into Hanson Honda and asked Pete to help me pick out a Civic. "You serious about this?" he asked, looking out at the Porsche in the parking lot. "Yeah, I am." He showed me a white 2018 Civic LX, basic model, cloth seats, manual transmission, nothing fancy, nothing impressive, just honest engineering, as Marcus would have said. "This one's good," Pete said, patting the hood. Marcus actually did the pre-delivery inspection on it. He always said the 18 Civics were the sweet spot. Refine the design without overcomplicating things. I bought it that day, paying cash, and drove it home feeling ridiculous. The seats weren't as comfortable as my Porsche. The engine didn't have the same throaty roar. And I felt completely invisible on the road. People didn't turn to look, didn't nod with appreciation, didn't see the car as an extension of my success. I was just another guy in a Honda. At first, I told myself I was honoring Marcus's memory, fulfilling a promise to a dying friend. I figured I'd drive it for a year, maybe write an article about the experience, then go back to my normal life. But something strange started happening. Driving the Honda changed how I moved through the world. In the Porsche, I'd been this aggressive driver weaving through traffic, racing from red light to red light, always in a hurry to get wherever I was going. The Honda didn't invite that kind of driving. It was calm, steady, efficient. I found myself slowing down literally and figuratively. I started noticing things I'd never seen before: the way morning light hit the mountains on my drive to work, the homeless encampment under the overpass that I'd driven past hundreds of times without really seeing, the small businesses lining the streets, the people walking their dogs, the kids waiting for school buses. In the Porsche, I'd been isolated, insulated from the world around me. In the Honda, I was part of it. The car started having problems around month 3, nothing major, just the normal wear and tear of a vehicle with high mileage. The brake pads started squeaking. The air conditioning developed that dying cat sound, and someone backed into me in a parking lot, leaving that dent in the passenger door. My old self would have taken it straight to the dealer, paid whatever it cost to get it fixed immediately. But I found myself thinking about Marcus, about his relationship with the tools and machines in his life. So instead, I went to Hanson Honda and asked Pete if he could teach me some basic maintenance. You want to learn to work on your own car? Pete looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Yeah, I do. Learning to change my own oil, replace brake pads, check fluid levels. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. There was something deeply satisfying about understanding how things worked, about being able to fix problems with my own hands instead of just throwing money at them. I started to understand what Marcus meant about the beauty of taking something broken and making it work again. And the Honda also changed how I related to other people. In the Porsche, I'd been a walking advertisement for my success. People treated me a certain way, approached me with a certain mix of envy and deference. In the Honda, I was just David, not David, the successful entrepreneur, or David with the expensive car, just David. I remember the first time someone helped me with the Honda, yeah, and I was at a gas station, and the car wouldn't start. I was under the hood, yeah, trying to figure out what was wrong. When an older man approached, having trouble, he asked. Yeah, in my previous life, I might have been embarrassed, might have called a or a tow truck rather than admit I didn't know how to fix something. But something about the Honda experience had made me more open to help, more willing to show vulnerability. Yeah, it just won't turn over. The man looked at the engine, jiggled a few connections, and pointed to a loose battery cable. Try it now. And the car started immediately. I tried to give him $20 for helping, but he waved me off. Like, just pass it along, he said. Help someone else when they need it. That's when I started to understand what Marcus had been trying to show me. And it wasn't about the car itself. It was about the relationships the car created, the way it connected me to other people, to the world around me, to a different way of being. I kept driving the Honda and my perspective kept shifting. I started thinking differently about my businesses, my investments, my entire approach to success. Yeah, instead of always looking for the next big exit, the next massive payday, yeah, I began asking different questions. What impact was I really having? Who was I helping? What kind of legacy was I building? I started using my resources differently. Instead of investing in high growth startups that might generate massive returns, I began funding companies that were solving real problems for real people. A startup that made sustainable agriculture technology accessible to small farmers, a company that developed affordable healthcare solutions for rural communities, a platform that helped connect elderly people with local volunteers. The returns weren't always spectacular, but the impact was measurable, tangible, real. I was still making money, still growing my wealth, but it felt different. It felt purposeful. Now, 2 years after Marcus died, I was driving the Honda to a meeting with a potential investment, a company that had developed an innovative electric vehicle charging system. As I sat in traffic, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd driven the Porsche. It was sitting in my garage, pristine and untouched, while I chose every day to drive this dented, imperfect Honda with its quirky air conditioning and squeaky brakes. The meeting was in a part of town I didn't know well, and I got lost trying to find the office building. I pulled into a small auto repair shop to ask for directions, and something about the place reminded me of Marcus. It was clean but cluttered, organized chaos. The kind of place where people brought cars they couldn't afford to replace, hoping someone could help them keep running a little longer. The owner, a woman named Sarah, gave me directions and then noticed my car. Civic, huh? Good choice. Those 18 are solid. How many miles you got on her? About 120,000. I said, we're just getting broken in. You take care of that car, she'll take care of you for, another 100,000 easy. As I drove away, I thought about that phrase, take care of the car and it'll take care of you. It occurred to me that Marcus had been trying to teach me the same principle about everything in life. Take care of the people around you, the community you live in, the world you inhabit, and it will take care of you in return. But it only works if you genuinely care, if you approach it with the same integrity and honesty that Honda built into their cars. I arrived at the meeting 15 minutes late, apologizing profusely. The founders of the charging company, two young engineers named Priya and James, were gracious about the delay. Nice Civic, James said as we walked into the building. Akio, hey, I had one just like that, through college and my first job, my most reliable car I ever owned. We spent 3 hours together and I was impressed, not just by their technology, but, by their approach to business. And they weren't trying to build the flashiest charging network or capture the luxury electric vehicle market. They were focused on making electric vehicles practical and accessible for everyday people, for families who needed reliable, affordable transportation. We want to be the Honda of EV charging, Priya explained. Not the most glamorous, but the most dependable. And I invested $2 million in their company that day, not because I expected massive returns, though I thought their approach was smart business. I invested because they understood something that had taken me years to learn. Sometimes the most valuable things are the ones that don't draw attention to themselves, that just do their job quietly and reliably, day after day, year after year. 5 years after Marcus died, my net worth had grown to over $20 million. My investment portfolio was diverse and healthy. My companies were thriving, and I was happier than I'd ever been, but I still drove the Honda. People started to notice in tech circles, in investment meetings, at industry conferences. I became known as the millionaire who drives a Honda. Some people thought it was a publicity stunt. Others figured I was just eccentric. A few understood that there was something deeper going on. Is it true you drive a 10-year-old Honda? Journalists asked me during during an interview about sustainable investing. It's 8 years old, I corrected. And yes, it's true. Why? I thought about Marcus, about our conversations at Manny's, about the promise I'd made to a dying man, because it reminds me every day what really matters, because it keeps me connected to the world I'm trying to help, because it's honest. The journalist looked confused, like she was expecting a more complex answer. But that was the thing Marcus had taught me. The most profound truths are often the simplest ones. The Honda had become more than just transportation. It was my daily reminder of Marcus's philosophy, my connection to a different way of thinking about success and worth. Every time I got behind the wheel, every time someone looked at me strangely for driving such a modest car, every time I chose not to upgrade or replace it, I was reinforcing the lessons Marcus had tried to teach me. But the real test came 8 years after Marcus died when I got the call that would change everything again. I was sitting in the Honda in the parking lot of my doctor's office, having just received some routine test results. When my phone rang, it was Sarah, the owner of the auto shop where I'd stopped for directions years earlier. David, this is Sarah from Martinez Auto. You brought your Honda by here a few years ago, asked for directions. I remember. Is everything okay? Well, I have kind of an unusual situation. There's this elderly gentleman, Mr. Peterson, whose daughter brought his car to me. It's a 2003 Honda Accord, and it needs some work. Nothing major, but more than he can afford right now. The thing is, this car means everything to him. His late wife picked it out, and he's driven it every day for 20 years. He can't bear the thought of getting rid of it, but he also can't afford the repairs. How much are the repairs? About $1,500, new timing belt, some brake work, yeah, a few other things. I could maybe do it for 1,200. I didn't hesitate. I'll cover it. Are you sure? You don't even know this man. I'm sure, but don't tell him it was me. Just tell him someone wanted to help. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Sarah's voice, thick with emotion. You know, in 20 years of running this shop, I've never had anyone do something like this. Why? I looked at my Honda, at the dent in the door that I'd never fixed, at the coffee stain on the console that had become part of the car's character. Because someone once taught me that fixing things that matter to people is one of the most important jobs in the world. After I hung up, I sat in the car for a long time thinking about Marcus, about Mr. Peterson, about the interconnected web of care and kindness that holds communities together. I thought about all the people who had helped me over the years, who had shared their knowledge, their time, their resources without expecting anything in return. I thought about the gas station attendant who helped me with my battery, the barista at Manny's who still asked about Marcus, Pete at the Honda dealership who had patiently taught me basic auto maintenance. That's when I realized that Marcus's lesson wasn't just about driving a Honda. It was about understanding that we're all connected, that small acts of care and kindness ripple out in ways we might never fully understand. The Honda was just the vehicle, so to speak, for a much larger truth about how we should move through the world. I started the car and drove home, making a decision that would have seemed impossible to my younger self. I was going to give most of my money away, not all at once and not carelessly, but systematically, thoughtfully, in ways that would create the kind of ripple effects Marcus had spent his life creating. I would fund more companies like Priya and James's Charging Network, invest in organizations that were fixing things that mattered to people, support individuals who understood that worth isn't measured in dollars accumulated, but in problems solved and lives improved. The Honda would be part of that too. I decided to start a small fund to help people like Mr. Peterson keep their cars running, to support the Sarahs of the world, who were quietly holding communities together, one repair at a time. I would call it the Marcus Williams Memorial Fund, and its mission would be simple: to help people take care of the things that mattered to them. 10 years after Marcus died, my net worth had grown to $25 million, even as I'd given away millions more. The fund had helped hundreds of people keep their cars running, supported dozens of small repair shops, and funded automotive training programs in underserved communities. But I still drove the same Honda Civic now with 200,000 miles on it, and even more character marks from a decade of faithful service. People still ask me about it, still wondered why someone with my resources chose to drive such a modest car. Some assumed I was making a statement about wealth inequality or environmental responsibility. Others thought it was a branding exercise, a way to seem more relatable or down to earth. But the real reason was simpler and more profound than any of those explanations. I drove the Honda because it reminded me every day of what Marcus had tried to teach me in those conversations at Manny's, what he had shown me through his example, what he had made me promise as he lay dying in that hospital bed. What worth isn't about what you own or what you can afford. Worth is about what you do with what you have, how you treat the people around you, the care you show for the things and people that matter. Success isn't about climbing higher or accumulating more. Success is about understanding your place in the web of human connection and doing your part to strengthen it, to repair it when it breaks, to keep it running smoothly for everyone who depends on it. The Honda had taught me that some of the most valuable things in life don't call attention to themselves. They just do their job day after day, year after year without complaint. Like Marcus changing oil and replacing brake pads, like Mr. Peterson driving his wife's Accord to the grocery store and the doctor's office, like all the people who keep the world running through small acts of care and maintenance that no one else notices or celebrates. I kept the Honda because it kept me humble, kept me connected, kept me focused on what really mattered. Every time I got behind the wheel, I remembered Marcus's smile, his gentle wisdom, his understanding that fixing things that mattered to people was one of the most important jobs in the world. Every mile I drove was a small act of remembrance, a tiny tribute to a man who had taught me that the most profound success often looks nothing like what the world expects success to look like. Last month, the Honda finally broke down in a way that would cost more to repair than the car was worth. The transmission had given up after faithful service, and Pete at the dealership shook his head sadly as he delivered the news. "She's been good to you," he said, "but everything has its time." I thought about replacing it with another Honda, continuing the tradition Marcus had started, but something told me it was time for a different kind of tribute. Instead, I donated the Honda to a vocational training program where students learning auto repair could practice on it, learn from it, maybe even get it running again. I bought a new Honda Civic the next day, same model, same basic trim level, same honest engineering, but I also did something else. I started a scholarship program at the local community college for students who wanted to learn skilled trades, students who understood that fixing things was valuable work, that taking care of what we have is often more important than always reaching for something new. The program was small, just 5 scholarships a year, but I named it after Marcus and structured it around his philosophy. Recipients had to demonstrate not just academic potential, but a genuine desire to help people, to solve problems, to take care of the things and people in their communities. And the first recipient was a young woman named Elena, whose family had immigrated from El Salvador when she was 12. She wanted to become an automotive technician like Marcus to learn how to keep people's cars running so they could get to work, take their kids to school, visit family, live their lives. When I met her to present the scholarship, she reminded me so much of Marcus, it took my breath away. The same curiosity, the same genuine interest in how things worked, the same understanding that helping people with the practical necessities of life was meaningful work. My mom's Honda has been in our family for 15 years, Elena told me. It's taken us everywhere we needed to go. I want to help other families have that same reliability, that same peace of mind. I thought of Marcus, of Mrs. Patterson, of Mr. Peterson, of all the people whose lives had been touched by someone who understood that keeping things running was a form of love, a way of caring for the community, a kind of success that couldn't be measured in dollars or status symbols. Now, 2 years later, I'm worth $25 million and I drive a Honda Civic, not the same Honda, but the same choice, the same values, the same understanding of what really matters. The car is newer, but just as honest, just as reliable, just as focused on doing its job without pretense or ostentation. People still think I'm crazy. At investment meetings, at charity galas, at conferences where everyone else arrives in luxury cars or hired drivers, I pull up in my Honda and people stare, whisper, try to figure out what statement I'm making. But I'm not making a statement. I'm living a promise, honoring a friendship, practicing a philosophy that was taught to me by a mechanic who understood success better than any MBA or business guru I've ever met. The Honda reminds me every day that worth isn't about the size of your bank account or the impressiveness of your possessions. Worth is about integrity, about consistency, about showing up and doing your job well, whether that job is fixing cars or building companies or simply being a good neighbor. Worth is about understanding that we're all connected, that caring for each other and the things that matter to us is what holds the world together. Marcus died 12 years ago, but his lessons live on every time I turn the key in my Honda's ignition, every time I choose substance over status, every time I remember that the most important things in life are often the most ordinary ones: the cup of coffee shared with a friend, the car that starts reliably every morning, the mechanic who takes pride in his work, the promise kept to a dying man. I'm worth $25 million and I drive a Honda because Marcus Williams taught me that real wealth isn't about having more than everyone else. Real wealth is about having enough to take care of what matters, enough to help others when they need it, enough to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that you've spent your time and resources in ways that make the world a little bit better. The Honda in my driveway isn't the most expensive car in the neighborhood, isn't the fastest or the flashiest or the most impressive. Yeah, but it's honest, it's reliable, it does its job without complaint. Year after year, mile after mile, it connects me to my community, to my values, to the memory of the best person I've ever known. And in a world that too often measures success by the wrong metrics, that celebrates the wrong achievements, that confuses net worth with self worth, maybe that's the most radical choice of all. Maybe choosing the Honda, choosing simplicity, choosing connection over status is the most successful thing I could possibly do. Marcus would understand. I think he'd be proud that I kept my promise, that I learned to see the world through his eyes, that I discovered the truth he'd been trying to share with me in all those Tuesday morning conversations at Manny's. Success isn't about reaching the top of some imaginary ladder. Success is about understanding your place in the human community and doing your part to keep it running smoothly, to fix what's broken, to care for what matters. I'm worth $25 million and I drive a Honda not because I have to, but because I choose to, not because I can't afford better, but because I've learned that better isn't always more expensive, more impressive, or more exclusive. Sometimes better is simpler, more honest, more connected to what really matters. Sometimes better is just a Honda Civic with a few dents and scratches, carrying you faithfully through life, reminding you every day that the most valuable things don't always look valuable from the outside. Sometimes the most successful choice is the most humble one, the choice that connects you to your community rather than elevating you above it, the choice that honors the people who taught you what success really means. Every morning when I get in my Honda and drive to work, I remember Marcus. I remember his smile, his wisdom, his understanding that worth is measured in the impact you have on other people's lives, not the numbers in your bank account. I remember the promise I made to a dying man, and I keep it 1 mile at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. That's why I drive a Honda. That's why I always will. But the story doesn't end there. Last week, something happened that brought Marcus's philosophy full circle in a way that still gives me chills when I think about it. I was at a red light, windows down, enjoying the spring air when I heard someone calling my name. I looked over to see a woman in her 30s standing next to a silver Honda Accord, hood up, hazard lights flashing. She was waving at me. David Chen. I pulled over, confused. I didn't recognize her, but she seemed to know me. I'm sorry, she said as I approached. You probably don't remember me, but I'm Elena Rodriguez. You gave me the Marcus Williams Scholarship 3 years ago. Elena, the young woman who reminded me so much of Marcus, who had wanted to become an automotive technician. She was wearing coveralls with Rodriguez Auto Repair embroidered on the chest. Elena, of course. How are you? Did you graduate? Her face lit up. I did. And I opened my own shop 6 months ago. I specialize in Hondas. Actually, it's what I know best. She gestured at her broken down Accord, though apparently I still have some learning to do. This is embarrassing. I laughed. What's wrong with it? I think it's the alternator, but I'm not sure. I was on my way to pick up a part for a customer when it just died on me. Mind if I take a look? She seemed surprised. You know about cars? A little. Someone taught me some basic maintenance a while back. We spent 20 minutes diagnosing the problem together. It was indeed the alternator, and Elena had the tools in her trunk to replace it temporarily with a spare she kept for emergencies. As we worked, she told me about her business, about the customers she served, about the elderly people who brought her their old Hondas and Toyotas with the same trust that Mrs. Patterson had shown Marcus those years ago. You know what's funny, she said as we finished the repair, the scholarship application asked about my philosophy on automotive repair. I wrote about this idea that fixing cars isn't just about the cars, it's about the people who depend on them. I talked about how a mechanic isn't just maintaining machines, they're maintaining people's ability to live their lives, to get to work, to take care of their families. I felt Marcus's presence so strongly in that moment. It was almost overwhelming. That's a beautiful way to think about it. Okay, I learned it from someone, she said, wiping grease from her hands. This mechanic named Marcus Williams. I never met him, but his story inspired me. The scholarship was named after him, and when I researched who he was, I found out about his philosophy on honest work, on the dignity of fixing things that matter to people. I've tried to build my business around those principles. My throat felt tight. What did you learn about him? That he worked at Hanson Honda, that he believed cars should be honest and reliable, that he treated every repair like it mattered because it did matter, at least to the person who owned the car, that he died young but left behind this legacy of caring, of understanding that the most important work isn't always the most glamorous work. Elena started her car and the engine turned over smoothly. There's a story about him that really stuck with me. Apparently, he convinced some rich tech guy to buy a Honda Civic and drive it for a year just to understand a different perspective on success and wealth. I always wondered what happened to that guy, whether he learned what Marcus was trying to teach him. I looked at my own Honda Civic parked behind her Accord and smiled. I think he did. Really? How do you know? Because I said, pointing to my car, I'm that guy. Elena's eyes widened, and for a moment she just stared at me. Then she started laughing, not mockingly, but with pure joy. The same kind of laughter Marcus used to have when he discovered something beautiful about how the world worked. You're kidding me. You're the tech entrepreneur, the one Marcus convinced to buy a Honda? Guilty as charged. That promise changed my life. Marcus changed my life. And you're still driving a Honda after all these years? Different Honda, same reasons. Elena shook her head in amazement. This is incredible. Do you know that your story is part of what convinced me to apply for the scholarship? When I read about the Marcus Williams Memorial Fund, I found some old articles that mentioned how this successful businessman had committed to driving a Honda because of something a mechanic taught him about real success. It was like this perfect example of what Marcus believed, that wisdom doesn't come from money or status. It comes from understanding what really matters. Yeah, and we talked for another hour standing there on the side of the road between our two Hondas. Elena told me about customers she'd helped, about the young single mother whose Civic she'd kept running through 3 years of night school, about the elderly veteran whose Accord was his only connection to the world outside his apartment, about the teenager she was teaching basic maintenance so he could take better care of his first car. I try to think about what Marcus would do. She said, when someone can't afford a repair, when they're scared about the cost, when they don't understand what's wrong. And I ask myself, what someone who really cared, who understood that these cars are more than just machines, would do. As we prepared to go our separate ways, Elena hesitated, then asked, would you mind if I told my customers about meeting you? Not about your money or your success, but about the Honda thing, about how Marcus's philosophy is still alive, still making a difference. I'd be honored. She got in her car, then rolled down the window. Marcus was right about Hondas. They're honest cars, but I think you've proven they're also cars that teach us how to be honest people. After she drove away, I sat in my Honda for a long time thinking about the circular nature of influence, about how Marcus's wisdom had rippled out through my life and somehow found its way to Elena, who was now carrying it forward to her customers, her community, the next generation of people who needed to understand that caring for the practical necessities of life is both meaningful work and a form of love. I thought about the scholarship recipients who had come after Elena, young people learning welding, plumbing, electrical work, automotive repair, all of them carrying forward is some piece of Marcus's understanding that fixing what's broken, maintaining what's important, caring for what people depend on is valuable beyond measure. When I finally started the car and drove home, I was smiling. Marcus had been dead for 12 years, but his philosophy was still alive, still spreading, still changing lives. The Honda in my driveway wasn't just a car anymore. It was a symbol, a statement, a daily reminder that the most important truths are often the simplest ones. I pulled into my garage next to the Ferrari that I kept mostly for sentimental reasons now, a reminder of who I used to be before Marcus taught me who I could become. The contrast was stark. The Ferrari, sleek and aggressive and beautiful, designed to announce its presence, to command attention, to separate its driver from the ordinary world. The Honda, practical and unpretentious and reliable, designed to blend in, to serve faithfully, to connect its driver to the community around them. Both cars were expressions of values. Both represented choices about how to move through the world. For years, I'd chosen the Ferrari's values without even realizing it: speed, status, separation. The Honda had taught me different values: humility, reliability, connection. Inside the house, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table where I'd been paying bills earlier that morning. My latest financial statement was still open on my laptop, showing my assets that had grown to just over $25 million despite years of generous giving. Numbers that would have thrilled my younger self, that represented security and freedom and the ability to help others in ways I'd never imagined possible. But the number that mattered most to me wasn't on that financial statement. It was the number on my Honda's odometer: 47,000 miles and counting. Each mile a small choice, a tiny affirmation of the values Marcus had tried to teach me, a incremental keeping of the promise I'd made to a dying man. I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing. The Marcus Williams Memorial Fund announces the expansion of its scholarship program to include mentorship opportunities, connecting recipients with established professionals in their chosen trades. The goal is to ensure that the principles of honest work, community service, and dignified craftsmanship continue to be passed down through generations of skilled workers who understand that their value isn't measured in dollars earned, but in problems solved and lives improved. As I wrote, I thought about Elna's repair shop, about the customers she served with the same spirit Marcus had brought to his work at Hanson Honda. I thought about the other scholarship recipients scattered across the country now, fixing heating systems and building houses and repairing electrical grids, all of them carrying forward some piece of Marcus's understanding that the world runs on the work of people who care about doing things right. The expansion of the scholarship program would require additional funding, maybe another $1 million over the next 5 years. I could afford it easily, but more importantly, I could afford it without compromising the simple life I'd learned to value. I would still drive my Honda, still live in the same house, still measure my success by the impact I had on other people's lives rather than the numbers in my bank account. That night, as I got ready for bed, I realized I'd been living Marcus's philosophy for over a decade now without fully understanding how profound it was. It wasn't just about driving a Honda or being humble or staying connected to ordinary people. It was about understanding that worth is created through relationships, through care, through the thousand small acts of maintenance and repair that keep human communities functioning. Marcus had understood something that most people never learn, that the mechanic who keeps your car running is performing an act of love, that the plumber who fixes your pipes is maintaining civilization itself, that the electrician who repairs your power lines is literally keeping the lights on for everyone who depends on them. These weren't just jobs or careers, they were vocations, callings, forms of service that deserved the same respect and recognition as any corporate executive or tech entrepreneur. The Honda was just Marcus's way of helping me see this truth. By choosing to drive the same kind of car as the people I thought were beneath my notice, I've been forced to recognize that they weren't beneath me at all. They were beside me, around me, part of the same human community that I belonged to, whether I acknowledged it or not. Over the years, that the Honda had taught me that, success isn't about rising above others. It's about understanding your place among them. It had taught me that wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about circulation. It had taught me that the most important work isn't always the most visible work, that the most valuable people aren't always the most celebrated people, that the most meaningful life isn't always the most ambitious life. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about tomorrow's drive to work, about the familiar, or feel of the Honda's steering wheel in my hands, about the routine satisfaction of a reliable car performing exactly as designed. I thought about Marcus, who had died too young, but had somehow managed to pack more wisdom and impact into his 30 years than most people achieve in twice that time. And I thought about Elena carrying Marcus's torch into the next generation, teaching her customers that their cars deserve care and respect, showing them that the person who fixes what they depend on is someone worth trusting, worth valuing, worth learning from. The Honda in my garage was more than just a car. It was a promise kept, a lesson learned, a daily choice to honor the memory of the best person I'd ever known. It was my way of saying that I remembered Marcus Williams, that I understood what he'd tried to teach me, that I was still learning from him, even though he'd been gone for 12 years. I'm worth $25 million and I drive a Honda because Marcus taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, can't be earned, can't be accumulated in bank accounts or investment portfolios. They have to be lived day by day, choice by choice, mile by mile. They have to be shared, passed along, given away freely to anyone who's ready to receive them. They have to be embodied in the way we treat other people, the way we approach our work, the way we move through the world. Marcus Williams was a mechanic who drove a used Honda and lived in a studio apartment and died with almost no money in the bank. But he was also the richest person I've ever known because he understood what wealth really means. He understood that we're all connected, that caring for each other is what gives life meaning, that the most successful life is the one that makes other lives better. I drive a Honda because I want to remember that every single day. I drive a Honda because it keeps me humble, keeps me grateful, keeps me focused on what really matters. I drive a Honda because Marcus Williams taught me that sometimes the most profound truths come in the most ordinary packages, and sometimes the most successful choice is the simplest one. I drive a Honda because 12 years after losing the best friend I ever had, I'm still learning from him, still trying to live up to the example he set, still trying to be worthy of the trust he placed in me when he asked me to see the world through his eyes. And every morning when I turn the key and hear that reliable Honda engine come to life, I smile and think Marcus would be proud. That's why I drive a Honda. That's why I always will.